There's a big reason why I wanted a system that is on water. And today I'm going to show you the benchmarks and the impact that not only overclocking but water cooling is able to give you on games that might not perform as well as we all hoped. I am TheGrayingTech, a gaming insider. If you would like to learn how to improve your gaming performance, start now by clicking that subscribe button. Okay, as you enjoy the final looks, Project Red Star here, I do have to make a request. If you are watching this video, if you have enjoyed this series, if you have enjoyed and used the information that I put together, my request of you is the next video is going to be short. It's going to be a glamour shot video. It is designed to promote the channel. Please, if this has been helpful for you, please consider sharing. Any social media, any platform that you have access to, please consider giving that video a like, promoting that video. Normally avoid these kind of requests, but for this one video, I am trying to promote the channel, trying to get more viewers, more subscribers, and more people involved in the channel that way. If you have the time and you're willing to put forth a little bit of effort, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so here we are with Borderlands 3, Far Cry 5, and Hitman 3, the three titles that I tested Red Star on air. We're going to use these as well to make sure that we have good, solid performance while we are on water as well. Two things I want to talk about here first with Borderlands 3. First up, it is a wonderful AMD-oriented benchmarking tool. If you have access to it, this is the benchmark that you should be using to dial in the performance for your game. And then by dialing it in for Borderlands 3, it should work fabulously for every other application and every other game that you throw at this system. Second thing, I noticed that the game does not like multi-monitor setups. In fact, I had to unplug 2 of my 3 monitors in order to get very stable and less stutter throughout the entire benchmark run. By having multiple monitors set up, it was stuttering roughly every 5 seconds. And quite honestly, that just is unplayable in my opinion. Okay, so let's jump into the benchmarks themselves. We're going to use the CapFrameX tool in order to do this. I highly recommend getting this tool if you don't have it already. This is going to help you really understand what is going on your system when you are trying to dial in the performance. So I've already gone over this tool and we're going to jump over here to analysis. Now this run right here, this is my XMP best air run. And you can see my average frames per second were 77 FPS on 4K badass mode. Very respectable. Extremely good performance out of this system, even on air. P5, P1, what are these? These are dips and drops in the FPS. You might notice these as stutters. You might notice these as just something just doesn't quite seem as smooth if you are not using something like G-Sync or a FreeSync monitor. In this particular instance, you just want these numbers as tightly grouped as you possibly can get them. And this kind of difference here, this is a very good tight grouping. So very happy with the performance. Looking at the on-air statistical sensor information, you can see the max load for the CPU on average 31%, maxed out at 56. 4.6 gigahertz and 4.95 gigahertz. Power usage here was 73, 94 on the max, temp was 64, 72 max. Now moving to the GPU. We maxed out the GPU 99% load, and we were there 97% of the time. Again, these are great, fabulous numbers. I was extremely happy with this system on air. You can see our GPU. You can see the power that the GPU was pulling and the temperature. Now, these are going to be very important because when you move a system over to water, these numbers from a temperature standpoint should go down, frequency and wattage should go up. That's one of the big reasons of putting a card like this on water, is to get even more performance and more electricity into the card. So let's see how it did on water using the same configuration numbers. You can see 85 was the average FPS with still a tight grouping. That is an increase of 8 frames per second on average, simply by moving it over to water. I didn't change any of the other settings. You can see our GPU was able to draw more watts. It was able to run at a higher frequency. It was able to stay in the load time for 100% of the run, and our temperature was only 47 degrees Celsius. Great numbers there on water. Now, the next thing I did, I went ahead and start tuning the card just a little bit more, just to see if I could get just a little more performance out of it, and we were able to do so. I was able to run at 2660 for my min frequency, 2760 for my max frequency. 370 watts were available to the card. I used 1.16 for my voltage and 1 for my SoC voltage. My TDC here was 464. If you have no clue what those numbers mean, check out the video that I did about how to use the More Power tool to modify and adjust some of the variables and exactly what those numbers do. So, wonderful performance on water already. We were able to get just a little bit more and really push the system more or less to the limit when it came to this GPU. All right, so let's look at these in aggregated comparison. So you can see here, water fully dialed in led the way. Our 1 percentiles and 0.1 percentile FPS scores were lower, but we also know that for the most part, we were still pretty rock solid as it pertained to staying with inside of that tight grouping. So Borderlands 3, we saw significant improvements across the board. FarCry 5 also demonstrated the same exact pattern. This time, the further we push the system, the more our 0.1 percentiles were, the more our 1 percentiles were. But you can see everything here was just slightly moving, which is good. Far Cry 5, I think, was really already kind of optimized almost as best as it could possibly be. And so by putting this over onto water was just a little bit of extra gravy. Hitman 3. Now, Hitman 3, I ran into a problem. You see, water's here at the bottom. XMP tuned water is in the middle, and then my air run is at the top. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure what happened here. Either I had a bad air run, Hitman 3 itself updated and changed some of these variables, but something happened there so that the air run here looks better. It's not like I can tear the system apart and redo it and put it back on air, but we can certainly see that 134 frames per second on average with a good 1 and 0.1 percentile scores on here. I'm not going to complain about that. So the other games are definitely showing that we are moving in the right direction, and I'm very inclined to believe that we've done so. Now, the last tool that I want to show you is my TimeSpy Extreme score. I'm running TimeSpy Extreme because I have a highly multi-threaded CPU that really needs to really be pushed to its limits in order to shine, to truly shine. So that's why I'm using TimeSpy Extreme. You can see my graphics score, 10336. That is a fantastic graphics score. Super happy with how this card is performing on water. Definitely has increased at least by 200. I want to say 200 on that graphics score. CPU score, what is up here? Well, I have some thoughts about that. And some of those thoughts revolve around RAM, and some of those thoughts revolve around PBO. And I will be doing a specific 3D Mark tuning session in a future video down the road. But you can see with this score, this 10278, this is a top 70, 75 kind of score for people that have this CPU and this GPU combination. And again, I'm extremely happy with those scores. I think that the system is performing extremely well, very happy with it. And it does need just a little bit more tuning, especially on that CPU. So there's just one more thing that I want to call out here, and that is Cyberpunk 2077. You see, on air, this game was averaging between 40 and 50 frames per second on high 4K. With the improvements that I have made to the system, the CPU, the GPU, the RAM, all of the things combined, I'm able to get a pretty solid 55 to 60 frames per second, regardless of the area of the city that I'm actually in, which means the game's actually playable because we've pushed the limit of the system itself. Now, I would point out it is completely ridiculous that that is necessary in order to get a game like this to run. But that's kind of the stage that we're at. And I wanted to show you that even still, there are still glitches and there are some still weird stuff that goes on inside of the game itself. But you can see by pushing the limits of my system, I'm able to play a game that is subpar in its optimization. So there you see the scores. You see that 3D Mark, particularly the CPU score, is not as good as it could be. My hypothesis there is that I can improve that score by improving my overall RAM, which is exactly the adventure that I'm going to start yet again with another series focused on RAM, this time focusing on some of the key differences between RAM setups and RAM speeds. When that series posts, you can check it out right here.